Thank you. Yeah, as I said, welcome to our September ChicagoRuby meetup. As a reminder, we aim to meet every first Wednesday of the month, except for this month, it's the second Wednesday. Want to thank Beyond Finance and the folks of Beyond Finance, so Sergio and his team, for letting us use their 15th floor, and for being such a gracious host. All right. Thank you. So before we get into our talks and stuff, I'm gonna go through some really quick housekeeping items and announcements. Yeah, so first, join our future events. I'm going to move. Yeah, okay. Join our future events. We will post our events on meetup.com/ChicagoRuby, as well as these community Slack channels. Meetup USA Midwest, Community Social Random within Ruby Central Community Slack. Reach out to me if you need an invite to that Slack channel, as well as the #Ruby channel within Chicago Tech Slack. Again, reach out to me if you need an invite to any of these channels. I will try my best to post reminders of our events. But yeah. Next thing. Interested in hosting. ChicagoRuby is on the lookout for organizations willing to host our monthly meetings. If interested, reach out to Anton, Daniel Henselman, who's not here today, or myself, and we will give you more info. Oh, yeah. Interested in speaking? We would love to hear from you. Feel free to reach out to me, Anton, or Dan for more information. If you're interested in speaking but unsure what to talk about, or if you're interested in hearing a specific topic, we've compiled a list of potential topic ideas that members of the community are interested in learning more about. Feel free to add your ideas here. There's a QR link to that Google Doc. For moderation purposes, this Google spreadsheet is open for comments only. And myself and Anton will add the ideas from the comments onto that list. Right. Yeah, if you're interested in ChicagoRuby, either by hosting a different type of event, like a hack night, lightning talks, code and coffee, collaboration with other groups, or through a sponsorship, we are so down. Let us support you, support us. Reach out to me for more info. Okay. Some announcements. These companies have reached out to us to share the word that they are hiring. Prevail.ai has open positions for mid-level and senior full stack developers. Reach out to Dan for more info. He's not here today, but he will be available on Slack. Red Circle is also hiring a Ruby integration engineer. Reach out to me. She is me, Michelle, and I can connect you with Mike Melendrez, the CEO of Red Circle. Okay, and this open forum for attendees. If anyone else has an announcement of a job hiring, feel free to stand up here and announce your job hiring posting. I'll give it like a minute. Otherwise, the mic is mine. Oh. Ah. All right. And lastly, join us next month. Our next meetup is Wednesday, October 1st, 6 p.m. to 8:30. It will be in Prism Spaces, which is in the Wicker Park area, I believe, 1212 North Ashland. We'll have two great speakers, Peter Bat Harkins and Prathana Shiva. I hear they're really, really cool, and so does Taylor Swift. And with that, we're getting started. I bring up to the stage Aji Slater. Yes, there is. I will send it to, it's on the Meetup link, but I will send it to you on Slack too. Is that okay?
Mhm. Got it. Thank you. That's cool. We'll figure this out. Woo! Thank you, everybody, for sitting tight with that. Here we go. So give me just a moment. I will do the thing. My name is Aji. Pronouns are they, them, and I work at Thoughtbot. And a fun fact, the highways where I grew up had pedestrian walkways over the top of them. And once as a young child, I asked, "What's a pedestrian?" to my father, who replied, "Someone who chooses to walk rather than drive a car." For years, I thought capital P pedestrians were a religious group identifiable by their beliefs that forbade them the use of the automobile. But enough with fringe religious groups. You're here to talk about process and about automation. the promise of the computer age, thinking machines that relieve us of the burden of manual work. Steve Jobs spoke of a bicycle of the mind, computers working in tandem with their operators to close the gap between thought and action. So why in this auspicious time is there still so much manual toil? We're supposed to be making progress on delivering value to our users, our businesses, our clients. It seems like the tool chain just keeps getting longer, the tech stacks just get taller, and the deadlines don't get any further away. We have to keep so much in our heads. We're juggling at least 3 project management apps. I don't have time to walk my dogs in the morning without listening to a tech podcast so that I don't fall behind. There are 1,000 hills out there, and none of them that I want to die on. I mean, to make any progress at all, we'd have to find some kind of magical land without meetings or without Jira, without Slack or return to office orders, code review, documentation, regression testing, TPS reports, direct reports, import maps, Webpacker, yak shaving, dog fooding, the bike shed and bike shedding, Terraform, Mastodon, the Metaverse, Sorbet, Gem Install, Rails New, 2FA, MFA, TCP, IDP, UDP, GPT, FTP, NLP, S3, SQL, DHL, DHH, DNS, CSS, AWS, SDF, APFS, API, AI, MRI, ROI, Make, Rake, Reek, Toots, Tweets, Skeets, Blogs, Flog, Reflog, and we're all sitting here waiting to see if federal troops are going to occupy the city. When am I supposed to automate? I'll be right there. I still haven't set the clock on my microwave forward an hour. Or is it backwards an hour? What day is it? We need to do a little focusing. We need to have a little zen. So let's consider this quote from Taoist thinker Lao Tzu. He was a Chinese philosopher influenced by and building on Central Asian and Indian traditions and mythology. Zen, as a school of thought, was born in the Tang dynasty of China that came into its own in Japan, was influenced by Lao Tzu, and stood on the shoulders of hundreds of years of dedicated practitioners and scholars. All of that is to say that what I'm about to do is a hand-wavy and reductive device in the service of a pithy phrase for a talk title. But the best way to describe what needs to be taken on in order to achieve progress in our goal of harnessing automation in service of developer happiness is a mindset, a practice, a relationship to our work. We're going to explore several principles of this mindset that in shorthand we'll refer to. There you go. So let's reflect on Lao Tzu's poetry now, because that's exactly what we need to get ourselves straight again, and reframe our conception of automation as an all or nothing prospect. You wouldn't write a Jira card that says implement tests for order serialization. The tests are part of the work. And we'll find that so too is it often incongruous to write a ticket to automate new employee account creation. As our change in mindset will carry practitioners of Zen automation towards that goal, a single step at a time. I want to share a practical example of the practice of Zen automation through a task that I encountered some years ago, and show how these principles guided my approach. So I was working on a product that had a concept of locations. Users would schedule their clients to go to a specific location for different activities. There were hundreds, if not thousands, of these locations across the country. As launch day grew closer, the partial list of locations hadn't changed since seed data from day one. There wasn't any tooling in place and no UI existed for new or updated locations. We missed one. Yeah. You know, it's a Ken Burns kind of effect we're going for here, but it's slowing it down. So as anticipated, I was given a list of few dozen locations that needed to be added to the system. That was a straightforward enough task. Parse and massage the list to the shape of our data, populate it into the database. No business logic or UI changes, anything like that. So I opened my text editor to a fresh new Markdown file and began with the first principle of Zen automation: always be capturing. Now, the importance of this step cannot be over-exaggerated. None of the rest of this works unless you start by writing things down. Writing everything down. I had only a single list of new locations to add, and yet I started with a Markdown file to capture documentation. That file was going to be my scratch pad, the edge cases I considered, links, thoughts, learnings, and of course, the steps I took to complete the work. I had this one-off task, taking a list, dropping a bunch of extraneous data, passing that file to some servers, making new records. I could have thought, well, I'll never have to do this again. It's so quick. Why bother with all of the notes? But the key to this becoming a habit and embodying our mindset of Zen automation is lowering the activation energy to creating and maintaining documentation. Activation energy is a minimum threshold of energy that has to exist in a system before a reaction will take place. It's that motivation that you need, right? The second cup of coffee that you have to get before you can make it through that weekly planning meeting. It means making choices and using the tools at our disposal to reduce the friction that stands between us and the goal. As we reduce the friction, the energy required to reach our goals is less. And again, what is that goal? So we'll remove the mental cost of considering the question, is this worth documenting, by documenting everything by default? A practitioner of Zen automation has favorite ways to quick start a new doc file, and they do it all the time. We'll remove the friction of deciding what folder to put something in with an inbox, a catch-all folder to be sorted later when its place becomes obvious. Or my favorite, lean on search and never worry about arbitrary organization. Let's live in edit mode. There isn't a cost associated with switching between the document viewer and the document editor because we never left the editor in the first place. If the wiki is in something like Confluence, we leave that tab open in edit mode instead of view. And we'll prefer Markdown in VS Code or Vim over a separate application. Small choices that alone relieve minor friction, but in aggregate support a shift in mindset about how we complete a task, and a rebalancing of what we value as part of our work. And those workflows can be further smoothed over by personal automation, orchestration of your local machine that bends it to your will. Maybe an Alfred workflow to open a specific tab of the browser for a document that you're working on, a fuzzy file search so your notes are always right nearby. Not everything has to be a formal document for the historical record. Maybe it starts as 3 lines in a file on your desktop. We'll shorten the round trip from thought to action by paying attention to our workflows, capturing them into a text file, and turning the inner eye of Zen automation on ourselves. How again? There you go. Paying attention. Let me share my screen. Yeah. Cool. Great. Yeah, thank you. So I looked over the file that the client had sent over. It was a lot of extra data that we didn't need. I wanted name and address. I used a Vim macro to chop out the cruft, and since recorded Vim commands are just text, I copy pasted them into my notes. I could have easily just used Excel or Google Sheets to do the same work and written out the steps. You could do it with awk if that's your jam. Getting it from a tidy list to the servers it needed to live on was non-trivial, and I'll spare you the specifics. But needless to say, my Markdown file filled with commands and AWS GovCloud hoops to jump through. Predictably, the one-off task that I thought I would never come back to again came back the next morning. The client found a few more locations that needed to get thrown in, and could I do it again? It was less than 24 hours since I had last added locations to the app, but instead of charging ahead with my memory of the steps I took, I opened the document from the day before and I followed along with myself of yesterday as I went. Here is where we encounter the second principle of Zen automation, in which we will refine to be fine. Because we've written it down, we can iterate on it. If you don't write it down, you're iterating on your memory of it. And Sandy Metz said, quote, "Depend on things that change less often than you do." While that was written in the context of code dependencies, it's still good advice. You rely on stability, build on solid foundations. So stay away from human memory. It is buggy AF. The situation was essentially the same as the day before, but instead of rediscovering the process, I copy-pasted over the macro to reformat the text. I had been a diligent practitioner of Zen automation. Each command was in my document, copy-pasted a line at a time into my terminal. I didn't have to spend gray matter compute cycles remembering what had been effective yesterday because I still had it. The documentation was essentially code, a checklist akin to pseudocode, automation to be executed by the Homo sapiens runtime. Guided by the first and second principles, we're already reaping the rewards only the second time through. Time spent looking up how to use sed for the 1,000th time can instead cut straight to the chase with a fraction of the time, effort, and toil. And what was the cost? Typing into a document? We're professional typers. We are keyboard athletes. Already, it's starting to feel like automation, just following instructions, expending a sliver of the thought and energy. The first time, we're assembling the path, clearing the way along an uncharted route. And in further iterations, we have the capacity to notice ways to enhance steps because we're not hacking through the unknown. We've freed up mental bandwidth and given ourselves a chance to make things cleaner, faster, more robust. The mentality of working in edit mode comes in handy again because our tooling is ready to modify and update and our mindset is there to match. Small changes that make the steps better jump off the screen. We construct a positive feedback loop that reduces slog and cognitive load, one manual iteration at a time, which frees up more opportunity for improvement, which in turn frees up more opportunity for improvement. And what can improvement look like in this step? Descriptions of actions can be converted to command line snippets. Actions that used to take a mouse click get converted into a shell script. Something once done through a GUI can turn into an API call. Combine two steps into one with a pipe and xargs. Parameterize steps for reuse, anticipating a quicker on-ramp to eventual programmatic control. Clarify steps, things like make sure it's running, become a checklist of how to make sure it's running. Adding QA checks. Maybe a step needs a gem or a class from the code base, so we copy paste the lines that we ran in IRB or the console last time, which of course we dutifully captured in Markdown, and make a rake task that can run in the right context, and then write down the command for executing it. There's a nigh infinite number of ways to tighten up that script as we go. What's at the core of this principle is that each use of the script also makes it better. We refine to be fine. So as Thomas A. Limoncelli put it, every manual action must have the dual purpose of completing the task and improving the system. Or to put it another way, the practitioner of Zen automation does not tolerate manual work that does not create an artifact or improve an existing one. This doesn't mean that everything has to go smoothly the greater than one times through, or it was a wasted iteration. Finding an edge case, new errors, exotic failures, debugging them and carrying on is extremely valuable experience because we will have written it down for the next step to use the script, which yes, can be you tomorrow morning. So when the third request to update locations rolled in, I was starting to catch on that this one-off task wasn't going to be a twice and done deal. I updated my Markdown file to an executable Ruby script. Do I mean that everything was automatic? No, I made myself a do-nothing script. That means the script didn't do anything directly except print out each step one at a time, waiting for our confirmation to continue each tick. Think of Ruby as our co-pilot, running the in-flight checklist. Pair programming terms, Ruby's the navigator, we're the driver. Might look something like this. We'll take our example of this markdown file, typical for what you might see in project documentation or a README, but we live in edit mode. It's all text, right? Does this file have to end in .md? Let's make it .rb. The steps written out are not valid Ruby syntax, so we'll just make them into strings. And they can stay essentially as they were. We can read strings in a Ruby file just as well as text in Markdown or to refer to the docs. And we'll use everyone's favorite debugging tool, puts, to print the steps out when we run it. In between though, we'll put a method call that you might not use day to day and someone who's coming to Ruby from Rails might never have encountered. That's gets. Gets received input from the terminal and returns it, but we're not saving it here. There's no variable or method call. It's a pause, so we can manually do the step, hit enter in the terminal to move forward as confirmation. If we were to run this file right now, each step of the instructions would be printed to the terminal and execution would pause until we came back and pressed enter. We're less likely to lose our place, but more importantly, we've lowered the activation energy to incrementally automate this process, like this. So we use one of the ways built into Ruby for executing shell commands to run that snippet for us. We don't have to copy paste it over, and we've automated step 2. So let's reword that puts. By keeping the description of what's happening, someone new to the project can get vital information about how the system is put together by walking through the steps as it goes. If this is a script that's going to run all the time, maybe you get fancy and add a command line option that skips the putses where possible. Several iterations down, I made my plain text file into a do-nothing script. I was the only person on my team using Vim, so I switched the macro to some Ruby to manipulate that text. I took descriptions of steps that were half explained or written in my own personal jargon and made them into something that other people would understand, because I was preparing for the third principle of Zen automation. Share early and often. Simply put, this mindset becomes most powerful when adopted by the group and turned into team norms and culture. If one of the major benefits of automation is reducing frustration and toil, then making documentation automation available to the wider team shares the load, reducing burnout and overwork. It's a common refrain, right? One person from the team does a task. Next time the task comes up, well, it only makes sense that that same person do it again. They already know how it goes. And then they do it again and again. Soon that developer becomes a single point of failure. A lone sick day grinds the team to a halt, and even worse, that's no fun and it's not fair to that individual and increases the chance that your single point of failure took that sick day to talk to a hiring manager. Rather than sealing the learning and knowledge of a process behind an individual, do-nothing scripts that explain to a new user what's going on can be a way to share knowledge of the system while still getting things done. If the documentation and scripts live in a folder of the repo, you can leverage everything that comes along with that. Version control, code review. It might just end up with some improvements while in PR right out of the gate. That folder, merely by existing, will encourage teammates to add to it, to pay attention to their workflows. We'll celebrate the addition of new scripts, causing a positive feedback loop. And if it lives near the code, it's more likely to get updated, especially if it is code, and code that the rest of the team relies on as well. The more ambitious teams might even find ways to write tests that fail if a change invalidates a portion of the documentation as a reminder to keep it up to date. Sharing workflows also increases consistency. We avoid costly creativity, meaning when the same problem is solved multiple ways in multiple places. Divergent solutions require conditionals and complexity. But most importantly, improvement becomes multiplicative. Anton finds an edge case we wouldn't have thought of. Michelle's environment is slightly different, and that makes the script a little more robust. And Sergio knew about a gotcha we didn't anticipate, catching the crash before it happens. As the team iterates together, improvement becomes practically incidental. Imagine walking away from a task and coming back 3 weeks later and having to do half the steps in half the time, and it's been rolled into the project's CLI tool. It's brilliant. Your project does have a CLI tool, doesn't it? Soon, CI for our teams will mean continuous improvement as we are always capturing and we refine to be fine together. New lists of locations came into the team at least once a day between when the first ask happened and launch day, but because we were sharing the workload, no one person was dragged under by repetitive cognitive stress. And my team's location upload documentation, eventually script, was faster than the manual work and getting faster all the time. More edge cases were covered. More of the outliers that used to be a manual escape hatch were covered by the machine. Eventually, we landed on what is the secret killer app of automation. Not a principle, because it's not something that's going to happen every occasion, maybe a North Star, something to keep in our back pockets, ready to pounce on when the opportunity arises. Because the script had been improved upon over time, we were able to add its functionality directly into the application. Everything was in place and it was essentially already running in production. The final step required was just to add a file upload input to the super user dashboard. Instead of emailing the dev team every time a new location needed to be added with a spreadsheet, users can do it themselves and see the results instantaneously. I mean, I feel like I could stop right there, right? Problem is, I can't. Because the story here is not about how cool I am for having followed the path of Zen automation. The story is that I didn't do any of that. My practical example, my rhetorical device, is fiction. Oh, the task was real, but my response to it is a rose-colored reimagining in 4K hindsight of how I wish I had been, and I'm still working towards being. But why didn't I act that way? I had read all the same articles and books that I have now. I always had a reason not to automate it, and I expect that we're all going to be familiar with most of them. It's urgent, AKA the stakeholder can't wait. It's faster to just do it. Automation is for DevOps. It's not worth the time it will take to automate. Usually pasted into Slack along with that XKCD chart, which just gets a link to this talk every time I see it. We've all been this dog before. Heard those reasons, thought those thoughts, or had them said to us, and I listened. I didn't push back against the impatient stakeholder in my head. Doing it manually because it's faster, that might be true if you're going to charge in and write it to be automated from the start, but the approach of written notes that gradually evolve describes another way. 20 minutes to do it manually versus a day and a half to write the automation is a substantial difference. 20 minutes to do it manually versus 25 minutes to do it manually, but record your terminal commands is not. So what is because it's faster, really? It's accruing debt. Resist just this once thinking by reminding ourselves of the cost of paying full price with manual work. We're leveraging our future and our team's future for exceptionally small benefit. I must have done that task a dozen times before it was final. It took roughly the same amount of time every time and not insignificant portion of my day every morning. But the frustration with that task did not stay so constant. When, of course, I could have had this. With each manual execution, I buddied up to my excuses and lost all of the compounding interest this practice can provide. I know that I've asked you all to think about taking a big shift in the way that you go about your work. It's a new mindset built on habits that ask you to ignore present anxiety for future benefit. And that is tough. Except that you don't need to go back to work and instantly be a Zen automation master. Just as automation doesn't have to be all or nothing, neither does this practice. In my example, the real one, not the fairy tale, just a fraction of Zen automation would have saved me so much frustration. So don't look at these steps and hold yourselves up against the ideal. Not every process is going to be automatable, but Zen and the art of incremental automation isn't about the end result. It is, again, a practice. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. See, there's nothing up there about where we're going to end up. The destination might be right back where we started, but after 1,000 miles of adventure, there and back again. So even if you never create a self-service document upload feature, like I never did, I hope that you will consider yourselves practitioners of Zen automation and take those first steps into your own 1,000-mile journey. Thanks.
Well, thank you. And unmuted on Zoom. Confirmed. Got it. Still unmuted. All right. Good. All right, ready to go? Okay. We're battling technical gremlins here in the room. Please hold. All right, awesome. Hi, everybody. So we have a bit of a theme going on tonight. Watching Aji's talk, I was like, yeah, that. But similarly, I also wish that I would have taken my own advice. So my talk is, what if we did less? And I thought, why do anything at all, really? So I got as far as submitting the talk. So green check for me. So let's just riff for the next half hour on what if we did less? I'm not going to do that. I refuse to improv people without their consent. So what if we did less? I'll just point out that I recognize that there's a certain irony here in having the guy who's driving 7,500 miles, putting conferences on across the country over the next couple of weeks or months, come in and talk to you about doing less. But we've already covered that. I wish I would have taken my own advice. This talk is not advocating laziness, however. We want to reframe the conversation through the lens of intentionality and focusing on desired outcomes. Why do we do the things that we do the way that we do? Again, why? So we're going to be we put on a conference this past weekend in Chicago. At about 8:31, I will start driving to Atlanta, and then we'll do an event this Saturday, and then we'll go to New Orleans. Then I'll go back home, and then we'll go to Denver, and then Portland, and San Diego, and Austin. Should be fun. Why? What if we did less? The most successful software you've worked with almost certainly succeeded not because of what the authors had added, but because what they chose not to add. I was looking for examples of this, and some of the ones that came to mind were, let's say, Rack. It's brutally simple. It's underpinning everything. I'm curious, are there really lightweight libraries that you all can think of that just do the bare minimum, that are widely used, super popular, et cetera? Does anybody have an example? Sorry? Middleman? Static site generator. I would say .env, easier than configuring environment variables. But every time we add code, we change the system. And that has the potential to introduce unwanted behaviors. And it also requires maintenance. It requires work from future us, who could be sitting there asking, why? Why did I do that? Raise your hand. Have you ever been asked to add a feature to a project? I was going to say, Kelly, never. That looked like just about everybody. Raise your hand if you've been asked to remove a feature from a project. Almost half. Of course, we're always asked to add more features. And when we're asked to add more features, what do? Add more features. But why? Why do we add features? Let me know if this scenario rings true for you. Stakeholder, hey, I was wondering, could you add a feature? It should XYZ. An unnamed developer, it's definitely not me. Sure, I've made that change and deployed it. Now the project XYZs. That's great. Thank you so much. Happy stakeholder. Dopamine hit receive for the developer. Everybody's happy. And then the stakeholder looks at it. Oh, that's not quite what I meant, but it does XYZ. You're not wrong. Unfortunately, you also have to QRST, UV, and W, but you do get the XYZ, so mission failed successfully. So we had XYZ on the roadmap, and now we can check it off. And our KPIs are met, and everybody's happy. Stakeholder says, hey, we're getting new bug reports. And it seems to be all about T's. We didn't even want T's. Users are complaining about the errors and it's driving people away. Sad stakeholder. There are any number of reasons situations like these play out, but more often than not, they're usually communication errors. Stakeholders assume that more features will lead to more users and more data that can be traded in the future for some traded in the future for money at some future point. And then communication, whether between stakeholders and stakeholders, or stakeholders and developers, or developers and other teams, or even developers and previous versions of themselves that have forgotten the decisions that they made and why. That communication is a skill that needs to be nurtured and invested in order to get our desired outcomes. That assumption that we get more users and we get more features, we get more data is a problem. Especially if we don't understand how we're going to monetize those people. And it's not a particularly new problem. But I would challenge that I'm not sure it fits our current situation that well. And that makes this a good time to do less. One advantage of being old, as I stroke my beard, one advantage of being old is that you've seen some of these cycles come through more than once, and you can kind of guess where this is going. So there was a time a little while ago where tech companies started doing some pretty significant layoffs, right? When did you see that? What year did you see that? Anyone? 23? Spring, summer, fall, winter? I like you. That's when I got laid off. And then before that, there was a pretty massive hiring spree during the pandemic that mostly coincided with the onset of COVID-19. And so we said fall of 2023 was sort of where we started to see tech layoffs. Huh.
Oh, it's interesting. I mean, not cool. Sucks.
It can both suck and be interesting. So what happened in the fall of 23? Interest rates went up and our lovely stakeholders realized, oh shoot, money's no longer free. Are you all familiar with ZIRP, zero interest rate policy? So the general idea is that we go through these cycles, like in 2020 with COVID, in 2008 with the subprime mortgage crisis, and in 2001, 2002, the dot-com crash. Those vertical pillars, as you can see, are recessions. And the result is interest rates come down, money gets cheap. And so people are like, you know what we could do with money is more. We could hire more people, we could get more features, we could do more business. Unfortunately, when you get free money, oftentimes it is associated with bad outcomes, not always. Are you familiar with the outcomes of lottery winners? Generally not great. Sudden large lumps of money tend not to create super palatable outcomes. So here's where we are. You can see it's that rate is much higher than where folks were predicting late last year. Something must have happened earlier this year that caused that. Can't imagine what that would be. But the more trap is often associated with these events that cause free money. And these events let stakeholders' imaginations go wild, ignoring the cycles that have come before them. Yeah, I know it looks like that, but this time it's different. They hire more people, request more features, they ignore profitability, they get high on monthly active users and other key performance indicators. I don't know about you, but to me, some of those things sound like addiction. They've had a taste of more, and the appetite needs to be sated. I know. We'll get rid of our developers, and we'll get developers from abroad. They're less expensive. Now the people abroad are getting expensive. Can we just replace them with computers? I mean, no, but it looks like you can. So what of those people? Many cast aside as no longer needed. Their trust is broken, but the stakeholder hunger persists. Another high is needed. We need more features. But then reality hits, and those debts come due. Money is no longer free. And many of you probably have noticed you have fewer coworkers, little or no training budgets. Ultimately, we're being asked to do more with less. I'd encourage us all to do less to get more done. Aji gave a perfect example of how some of that comes to pass. Let's get back to basics, like all the way back. Because there's no better place to get educated than first grade. There's always nerves. Does anybody know who this is? Oh, shoot. Her name's right there. I missed my slide build-in. So this is Case Loan. She had a video go viral on TikTok because she asked her first graders to describe how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Pretty simple request, even for first graders, right? I'm not going to make you watch the whole video. I do have the link if you want it. I will share it after the fact. Some examples where you get the bread and you get the peanut butter and then you get the jelly. Is this a sandwich? No, of course not. So you put the bread flat and she squishes the heck out of this bread. And then naturally, what comes after that? You put the jelly on. You put the peanut butter on. And at this point, her kids are losing their mind. Because even a first grader understands the outcome of a vague prompt is that you're not going to get the result that you expected because your actual need was never communicated and assumptions were made. So when you are asked to add a feature, do you ask more details? Do you ask about the desired outcome? Or do you take the literal instructions given and make assumptions in order to just deliver something? Because if it's the latter, this is an incredibly frustrating experience. You spent a lot of time taking actions that weren't productive and left you wondering whether you could have done this a smarter way. Maybe if you'd just done it yourself. AI will make all sorts of assumptions based on the limited information it's prompted with, and it will provide an answer. If you approach your job as taking a prompt from a stakeholder uncritically and trying to give them a plausible answer, maybe AI can take your job. The value of having human in the software development lifecycle is that we have intuition, skepticism, the desire to understand, and the desire to improve. We recently had a client come back into our lives. We had worked on a project with them about 8 years ago. There was a subsequent drama in their company that caused the project to go into mothballs for about 8 years. Like literally nobody touched it for 8 years. I can't offer too many specifics about the project, but what I can tell you is that it featured a number of graphs, shapes, really. And our solution to that 8 years ago was to use D3.js to draw these graphs or shapes. Hundreds and hundreds of shapes. So after 8 years, we were asked to spin up the app again. You know, no big deal. And while that was something that we could do, it was a Rails 6.1 backend, and the front end libraries like D3 have their own independent upgrade cycles from that. Things that are manageable over time, but left frozen in time, become a darn chore. So why do you want to do this? Why do you want the app back up and running? Things had changed in their business, and they had a new target to sell this thing to. We want to take the graphs that we made over there, and we want to display them in an app over here. And over here, this is an HTML prototype that we want to be able to show stakeholders in about a month's time. Taking a good-sized app from Rails 6.1 to 8 with incremental upgrades could take most of that time. And D3 had gone through big transformations in that time. It went from callbacks to promises. API had changed. We could spend that month learning the API changes. We could go through Webpacker, etc. I see some of you have been hurt before. But our solution was not to upgrade the app at all. We were able to do a design sprint and build an updated version of the same app in that month-long time. We also did not bring D3 along at all in this solution because we had learned in the previous run that they're really shapes. They're not graphs. Stakeholders had told us graphs when we started, so we chose a graphing library. We were able to use a couple of view components to draw polygons with SVGs, making the new application accessible, CSS aware. We can even use Hotwire to address the interactivity needs and wants that we know will come, haven't been asked for yet, but they're stakeholders. They're going to ask for it. And then finally, a data migration allowed us to bring in all the existing app in one fell swoop. It would have been easy for us to spin the app up. Digging in a little bit gave them a better final product. And the end result looked very similar, but it was a whole lot easier for us to work with. And we delivered quickly enough that it made the client successful, which has led to additional work. Had we just done what they expected, done what they asked for uncritically, we may have been in for a month and then out. Another example, we recently joined a project where a very well-intentioned developer had been taking bug tickets and fixing them. Good job, developer. He also deployed the updated code, and those requests from support would come in a team chat. He would investigate them, write the fix, deploy the solution. Fixed. Okay. What did you do? So our earlier conversation, hey, thanks for fixing that bug. Everybody feels good. That's not quite what we meant, but it's good enough for now. The bug is fixed. What do you mean there's a new bug? Stopping this cycle meant that there were known bugs on the site. We stopped deploying bug fixes. But continuing this cycle would have meant that there's new unknown bugs. And communicating with customers that are affected by the bugs that we know about, they're heartened to hear that there's an understanding as to why the behavior happened. And often the team knew even before the customer knew that they were affected. Stopping this cycle led to a better outcome for our customer, even though it's counterintuitive. So how do we work against the initial desire of delivering more? For individual developers, you can do a weekly code review with the sole purpose of what do you delete? I thought I stole something or something, but just good reaction from the crowd. Is anybody aware of the to-list strategy? This is a tool used by Warren Buffett, but you could apply it to development as well. You make a list of 25 things that need attention, and then you take that list and you reduce it down to 5. And you pay attention to the 5 things that you want to give attention to, and the other 20 things don't get any attention. Note that this is for individual developers. If your boss has a list, they may not be happy with you just not paying any attention to the things that you're being assigned. Write a default diary. So take notes. What do you do automatically every week? Has anybody done like a time journal or anything like that? Pomodoros. There you go. Any other examples?
It's all good. It's not messes my head a little bit because it's crazy how much time you really waste on the bug.
Absolutely.
2 hours, and if you really like time track this year, it's like where did I spend my time?
Absolutely. Measure twice, cut once. This is an old adage or an old saying in woodworking, but you can measure whether things are actually being used. My wife's company had barcodes in their software, and she did not want to support a barcode reader anymore, but people were using barcodes, or at least she was told. Once we put in some measurements, she realized that 3 users in the entire system were actually using it. She reached out to them, and they were happy to move to QR codes, which required no hardware. For teams, consider subtraction sprints. Dedicate time to removing rather than adding code. This is another thing that you're going to have to get buy-in for, but I would encourage you to understand how your business makes money, how they value your contributions, and be loud about it. These are things that we should be willing to fight for. And if these are things that our employers aren't willing to give on, maybe that's a signal that you've been looking for. Who here does retrospectives? Good number. So there's lots of different formats. The one of them is, what should we keep doing? What should we do more of? And what should we stop doing? The active thought process of thinking, what should we stop doing, is really powerful. And again, some of these are only possible if you have permission to say no. Your culture should be such that you can talk to your boss, that they listen, and they understand there's value outside of adding. There's value outside of more. At a point in time where we're all being asked to do more with less, the responsible action is to do less to get more, to allow you to get more of the right stuff done. Thank you. I should have an ending slide. That would be smart. Thanks, everybody. Or should I? Hey, sorry, Zoom. I closed thinking we were done, and then Michelle asked me to do more. So question was, what sort of things do people stop doing? An example I think of this is, going from waterfall processes to going to agile, doing the things that are successful for you rather than just following a process to follow a process. I think that there's lots of things that having very verbose comments and documentation, some people stop that and then replace them with either specs or documentation that's executable inside the code. But it really does depend on the things that your team finds valuable or you find valuable for yourself. I don't know that I have a lot of generalizations. Anton. I would say that folks should be aware of how their employer makes money and make sure that it's aligned with their view of the world, which is not necessarily like values or whatever, but we were able to look at graphs that pointed out, oh, stuff's going to go down here because the interest rates are going up. We can't predict that future, but we can understand what's going to happen if it comes. And so it's easy to come in, write code, write some specs, push, and go home. It's harder to actually participate in your job and at that higher level, be aware it's more work, but it is well worth it. Any other questions? Okay. Oh, I see one in chat. Thanks, David. Good to see you.
Are you part of Papa?
No, that's him.
No, it's inspired by the red, white, and black presentation. Very Papa. That's the way.
I mean, Rails. I don't know if perhaps this is more of a ThoughtBot red color.
It is like that Western brand you thought recently.
See, I'm on theme. All right. Thanks, everybody.